Alrighty. Good evening, everybody. This is not going to be a formal show by any means. I just wanted to do a little bit of a catch-up stream because I know I've not been active lately. I've had a bunch of stuff going on. That guy over there, he had to have two teeth pulled, and he's been kind of lazy, laying around and enjoying the pain pills he's been given and everything like that. So he only has to lose three more teeth, and then he'll catch up to me. So basically, last week, the reason that I just kind of fell off the face of the earth, I didn't know that the Fayetteville Marksmen were having that alumni game, and I saw I could play in it. I'm like, I haven't been skating. I haven't even really been working out. I've just been like kind of working and coming home and doing this when I can and everything. And I was like, you know what? I think I'll do that. And I just spent that entire week getting some cardio in, getting some ice time in, and eating pretty good. And then by the time that game came around, I felt like I was good to play in it and everything like that. And it was fun. It wasn't a knockdown drag out game by any means, but I will be better prepared for it next year. And I'm hoping to be back on the ice myself full time come April. So we will get to the first comment here, and it's always the same guy with the first comment, my boy BTS. What's up, dude? This better be good. I stopped watching George Lopez for this. Well, you might see something more comical in the game if the Hurricanes don't get their stuff together tonight. So I don't have any slides or anything put together with this. I'm just going to kind of talk about what the Canes need to do, I think, in general, to kind of right the ship. Now, I did not watch them play against the Islanders on Saturday because I was at the Crown watching the Marksmen and the Quad City Storm after the game I played in. I will say this. Carolina has got to figure some stuff out, and I think part of that comes with not putting the forwards in a blender so damn much because I think that's throwing a lot of the chemistry off. Now, I have several things to say about the lines. I'm going to just read them off to you, and then I'm going to talk about some stuff with them and talk about some stuff in the past and everything. I'm looking for the projected lines right now. Let me go on Game Day Tweets and pull it up there because I don't see them. All right, so the lines. Jarvis, Aho, Natchez, Robinson, Drury, Blake, Martin Nuxtall, Svechnikov, Carrier, KK, Roslovic. Defense is the same. Kochekov and net with Tokarski backing up. I bet we see him play at some point this week. BTS says, I'll be surprised if we don't see a goalie trade in the near future. I don't know if we're going to see any sort of move at all. One thing I am going to talk about a little bit later in the show, if I have time, is one semi-realistic trade target that we could maybe get since so many people want Jesperi Kotkaniemi out of here. I don't. I think he's shown improvement over last season. But at this point, I'm not even questioning his skill or his skill set being a good fit. I'm starting to wonder if there's some sort of like disconnect between him and Brind'Amour. All right, so here's the first thing that I want to address. A lot of coaches have said that they don't number their lines. If there is a team that comes close to that, it's Carolina, with as far as having everybody buy in, everyone have to work hard and kind of evenly distributing the defensive and offensive capabilities of each of the forward lines. I know Rod says he doesn't number the lines, and I understand where he's coming from when he says that. That being said, even if these lines are more situational than hierarchical, there's still certain lines and certain players that are going to be utilized more than certain lines and certain players. Now, I understand that Jack Drury is a very defensively competent fourth-line center. I will not dispute that. He's got, I think, enough of a ceiling to maybe take Jordo's place as the 3C shutdown penalty killer guy in the future. He's got a little bit more speed. He's got a decent amount of physicality. He's very good as far as like reading where he needs to go defensively to disrupt transition, and he's really good at defending in his own zone, and he's great at the back-checking aspect of the game. However, he does not have more of a scoring touch than Jesperi Kotkaniemi. I'm sorry, he doesn't. Even on his worst day, he just doesn't. So Drury's utilization 5-on-5, I'm kind of about, to be perfectly honest. We had the same conversation years ago. You guys probably remember a gentleman by the name of Clark Bishop. He came in and he had a few good games, and a lot of people were like, oh, how far is this guy going to get up the depth chart? And everybody else was like, no, dude, he's a 4C. Like, that's all there is to him. And he ended up not staying. He got traded to Ottawa, and I don't remember who it was for. But Jack Drury is a bottom six center, a 3C at the absolute best. He had 2C potential at one point. That ship has sailed. That time has passed. I don't see him being anything greater than a third-line center. So the idea of him being on the depth chart over Jesperi Kotkaniemi, whether it's formal, informal, figurative, or literal, it should not be the case. Drury's minutes need to be mostly in a shutdown capacity. KK is a guy that you need to drive offense. I think he's done so for the most part, and he had one bad period, and he's not been in the same spot on the depth chart ever since. So just to summarize what I'm saying about this, Rod says he doesn't number the lines, but some lines are deployed than others. Whether you mean to or not, everybody is on a numbered line. Unless you have 4 lines that evenly split 15 minutes every single game, which is not going to happen, the lines in one way or another are numbered because they don't all have the same TOI, and they never will. So I understand where he's coming from with that, but it's just not true that they might come close in time on ice, but as far as them actually being, there's no numbered lines, there's no situational lines, there's no hierarchical lines, that's just not true. There's situations where you want Aho out there instead of Drury, for example, or you want KK out there instead of Drury, for example. BTS says, should we re-sign KK when his contract is up a lot less money, obviously, or should we try someone else? That's so far down the road that it's not even worth thinking about right now. What should be thought about in regards to KK is whether you want to try and move him or if you want to continue to keep him and maybe see if you can work something out with him and Brendamore. Like, for example, Natchez and the organization were at odds, and it was pretty public that they were at odds to some degree or another. How much so, we'll never really know probably. But Natchez and the organization were kind of at odds before this season started. However, that clearly things have gotten worked out there pretty well. Natchez is our leading scorer, and he's habitually staying near the top of the charts as far as overall point scorers in the NHL. So things like this can get worked out. As far as like a realistic like trade target, and I mean this wholeheartedly, I might get laughed at for it. I don't know how you would make this work because you'd have to move some salary out, and KK is the guy that it would probably have to be, is if maybe you could get Nashville to give up Ryan O'Reilly, then you have a second line center, like a definitive second center. Aho, O'Reilly, Stahl, and then if you even say don't have Drury, you can call up Suzuki to fill the fourth line center role. And that's just a theory. But I'm just saying that, like, if they're really just over this KK experiment, if him and Rod are never going to get along, KK will go before Rod does. We already know that. We saw it with Eric Haula. So if KK is going to go, he's got a no trade clause that kicks in. I want to say it's next season. If they're going to go ahead and do that, then they need to just go ahead and pull the trigger on that and stop messing around with it. But here's where I have to levy some criticism at Rod. I started to type something up about this the other day, and I stopped because I couldn't figure out exactly how I wanted to word it. Now I think I know. Part one of my criticism of him was saying that he doesn't number the lines, even though lines are numbered by default because certain players are utilized more than others. Now, for example, Stahl might have more time on ice in a game where you kill a lot of penalties, or you have a juicy 3-4-1 lead and you want him out there making sure that gets shut down. Okay, or the other team gets shut down and he's spending a lot of time playing against the Crosbys, McDavids, and Matthewses of the world. I totally believe that. But as far as like Jordan Stahl being a guy who's on PP1, PK1, and utilized heavily 5-on-5, that's not the case. So this is where I have to levy some criticism at Rod. I understand you want to have every line be as equal as humanly possible. That's fine. But saying that certain lines are not utilized more than others, I can't agree with that. Or that certain players shouldn't be utilized more than others, I can't agree with that. Or that certain players who, while maybe more defensively competent but don't have as much of a scoring or a playmaking touch, are moved further up the depth chart, or we'll say given more time on ice, that's just not going to work. So, for example with that, let me look at the lines again for tonight, and we're going to talk about them a little bit. Jarvis, Aho, Natchez. I'm totally okay with that line. Jarvis and Aho have more chemistry and on a bad night than Aho and Teravainen did on a good night. And I mean that with a ton of adoration for how Aho and Teravainen played together. And one cool thing about the Four Nations face-off is that we're going to see those guys play together again, most likely. But Aho and Jarvis, their chemistry is off the charts. They should never be broken up. Additionally, Jarvis, while he does add a scoring touch to Martinook and Stahl, he shouldn't be down there with them. He needs to be spending his minutes with guys like Aho, guys like Svechnikov, so on and so forth. So then let's look at the second line here. Robinson, Drury, Blake. I know that that's listed as the second line, but that should be a really high-end fourth line. That's a line that shouldn't be seeing minutes in really game-critical situations, especially if you're down by a goal or if it's tied. That's one of those lines that should be expected to keep it close. Let me flip back over here again. Martinook, Stahl, Svechnikov. So here's one good thing about this line. Even though I don't like Svechnikov being buried down there, I know he's not been the absolute best, but especially not 5-on-5. But one good thing about that is I have said over and over again, Andrei Svechnikov is better on the right wing than on the left. He shoots the puck in more advantageous high-danger spots when he's on the right, even though he's a left-handed shot. He cuts to the middle of the ice faster, he uses his frame, and he gets better and cleaner looks at the net when he's playing on the right. So that's one good thing tonight. Martinook and Stahl drive a lot of possession, so Svechnikov could potentially add one, more physicality to that line, and there's already a ton of physicality there. And two, he can add some scoring to it. That being said, I still think Svechnikov should be higher up in the depth chart, but not with Aho. I'll get to that in a minute. So that line I'm about Carrier, Kotkaniemi, Roslovic. This is where I kind of have a little bit of a problem with this. I don't see chemistry developing between Carrier, Kotkaniemi, and Roslovic. We'll see how it works out tonight, but they're also playing against the Sharks. So even if these lines work out against this team, this is a good time to experiment with it. Don't get me wrong. But even if these lines work out tonight, when they're going up against a team that's not near the bottom of the league, is it going to work out the same? Or are we just going to be shuffling the lines again next game? Because if I had to guess, even if they win tonight, which I think they will, if Carolina wins tonight with these lines, is that really enough of a sample size against an opponent that says, okay, we should go forward with this? I understand mixing it up because something didn't go well in the game. You come out in the third period, you mix the lines up to try and spark the boys. You know, it's kind of this, it's a softer version of, you know, swapping your goaltender out mid-game. But go back to the default lines at some point or another. We had lines that were incredibly dominant, and I feel like Rod and KK have been at odds over one bad period in Columbus. One. When we were on our third-string goalie and we still managed to – or excuse me, when our starting goalie got hurt and our third-string goalie eventually lost in a shootout. That just wasn't a good night. And there was plenty of blame to be passed around in that entire game, and not all of it was on KK. I understand he had one really bad mistake and ultimately a really bad period that kind of led to a lot of stuff. But I feel like Drury's being given a little bit more of a leash than KK, and KK's expected to have a bigger role. Stuff like this is going to kill the kid's confidence when he was just starting to get it back. So that's where I have a little bit of an issue with that. And that is not me having a dislike of Jack Drury, and that is not me overinflating KK because everyone knows I'm a KK fan. But that's one of those things that really needs to start being looked at is why is this being done like this? Now, when I look at these players, even though they don't want to have a definitive top six and bottom six, well, there is, as far as the talent gap of players you expect to go out there and not get scored on and score, and the players that you go out there that, or let me rephrase that. You have players that you expect to go out there and win the game for you, and you have to get players that you expect to go out there and keep the game close. In regards to the forwards, players that I expect to go out there and win the game for you, Jarvis, Aho, Necas, Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi. I'll list those five in that regard. Now, when you're talking about guys who are just supposed to keep the game close, I will say Drury, Stahl, Martinook, Carrier. Guys who are kind of in between, Blake, Roslovic, and we'll move Robinson over to the kind of in-between category. So as far as players who need to be definitively having the most responsibility, the most offensive zone draws, and try to not draw the toughest matchups, but are also expected to go out there and create the biggest net positives, Jarvis, Aho, Necas, Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi, those guys by far. And then when you're talking about guys you can move up and down the lineup, Robinson, Roslovic in particular, and Blake. If you still had Jesper Fast here, he would fall into that category as well. The defense is a totally different conversation. So if it's up to me, which it's not, but if it's up to me, there's a definitive top six on this team, and it consists of Aho, Jarvis, Necas, Svechnikov, and Kotkaniemi, and then fill in the blank for the last guy. Right now, Jackson Blake is emerging as that player. He's not there yet. He's probably going to start getting some looks there more often. Eric Robinson has been great. And why they won't go back to the lines that were working well before, I don't know. Now, if Aho and Necas can find another level of chemistry together and Nate just works out being on the left wing, you can try Svechnikov on that line as long as he's on the right, in my opinion. Even though I know I've been a absolute ardent critic of the idea of Aho and Svechnikov playing together. I don't see the chemistry there. The one time that they had chemistry with it, I felt like, was when Teravainen was still on the team. Teravainen was playing left, Aho was at center, Svechnikov on the right. That worked out pretty well for a lot of stretches. I could see Aho, Jarvis, and Svechnikov working out if Jarvis is on the left and Svechnikov is on the right and they're centered by Aho. Or if you have Natchez on the left and Svechnikov on the right. The only way I will condone trying Svechnikov and Aho together again is if Svechnikov is on the right wing, because that's where I think that he succeeds the most. That's where Aho is going to be able to play make for him the best. That's where Svechnikov is going to generate higher quality shots. And even if they don't go in the net, it's high danger chances, it's rebounds. That's stuff that those hardworking guys like Jarvis can go get, those guys like Aho can go get, and, clean the garbage up from there and everything like that. So that's one of the things that you have to consider with those lines right there. Now, as far as some of the criticisms of the defense lately, Gostisbehere and Walker, I've seen some heat being generated for that pair. So here's the biggest thing to remember with that pair. Gostisbehere and Walker were not brought in to be a defensive stalwart shutdown pair. People a lot of times were saying, oh, well, they're not better than Shea Pesci. Well, they weren't made to be Shea and Pesci. That pair was designed specifically to drive offensive zone possession. That pair was designed specifically to go out, be on offensive zone draws, and when those draws are won, to generate more offense with them by managing the puck correctly at the point and putting shots on net, making smart seam passes, all that type of stuff, and pinching at the right times, retaining the offensive zone. That pair was made for that. I knew that when they brought both those guys in. When they brought both those guys in, it was pretty apparent that's what that pair was for. That is an offensive zone pair to generate offense. That's what they're for. And with all the time that Carolina spends in the offensive zone, it makes sense why they would have a pair like that. If we'd had a longer look at D'Angelo and Shea, that was kind of the idea behind them too. And with Gostisbehere and Walker, it's more like they split the defensive responsibilities kind of 60-40, the 60 being Sean Walker, and the offensive responsibilities lean heavily towards Gostisbehere, obviously. So that's what that pair was designed for. When the whole team in front of them isn't playing well, that pair is going to get ran over a lot. It's just the way that it is. So I don't condone the idea of really breaking up the defensive pairs just from that standpoint. Chatfield and Orlov, I've heard that they weren't good on Saturday. Like I said, I didn't watch the game, but don't expect that to be that way for that long. That pair has been incredibly consistent as far as which pair is our best one. I think that is still it in terms of the ability to shut down transition and defend in the defensive zone. Slavin and Burns, well, if the other two pairs are what they are, there's not really anything you can do to change that. There's no rhyme or reason at the moment to shuffle the defense, in my opinion, even though in the future I would like to see some looks of Sean Walker with Jacob Slavin maybe. But whatever you do, don't break up the Orlov and Chatfield pair. If you swap anybody, maybe swap Sean Walker with Brent Burns here and there and maybe see how that works. Tonight might be a good night to try that. But Rod does not like to change up the defensive pairs, and I think he's a little bit too stubborn when it comes to changing up the defensive pairs at times, but he's the exact opposite with the forwards. He's a little bit too much with the blend of more with the forwards. So that's one of those things where I'm hoping that they find good line combinations. Let your definitive scoring forwards be those guys. Let your definitive shutdown forwards be those guys and chip in some secondary offense. But part of the reason why this team is struggling so much right now, in my opinion, is Rod won't leave the goddamn lines alone, and he keeps swapping everything up. These guys can't acclimate with each other, and by the time they do get acclimated, and if they do start playing well, there's one mistake, and next thing you know, you're changing everything up, and these guys cannot they can't get in sync with each other if they're constantly having new line mates. That has got to be really annoying for these guys, especially at this breakneck pace that this game is played at. So, and especially a team that plays a speed game like Carolina, these guys have to be given a chance to acclimate to their lines, and then when they do have issues, let them work through it. So, Rod, I know you don't watch the show, but if you by chance can, hear me somehow, please set the lines, give them a chance to work through stuff, and let your top 5 players be in the top 6. And I understand that you need to decide on a 6th guy, and that may change over time. And at times, like if the 6th guy in the top 6 is Blake or Robinson, which I think are the top 2 candidates for that. But I think that we have a much better forward group than what's been shown lately. They just aren't being given the chance to work out the kinks. That's my opinion on it. And like I said, I consider 5 of those forwards definitive top 6 players. I consider 5 of them definitive bottom 6 players, and I consider 2 of them guys who can be moved up and down the lineup. And I think that's the way that if Rod starts looking at the roster that way, they'll start doing a lot better. And I just feel like Jack Drury's getting away with some stuff that KK's not. And that's not right, because as far as who the organization decided to make a long-term investment in, they decided to make more of a long-term investment in KK than Drury. If they really, really, really believe that that is a mistake at this point, then they need to work extra hard to get KK off the books. If that means you got to retain $1 million off of his contract, at that point it goes down to about $3 million for whoever takes it on as far as AAV goes. Go ahead and do it, because $1 million ain't going to be much in a couple of seasons with the cap going up, and then we're going to have some breathing room with Orlov and Burns coming off the books anyway. So we need to consider something like that for first off. So as much as I love Rod as a coach, and he's definitely an excellent player coach, he's good at getting the best out of players, he's making a mistake constantly juggling these lines. If that doesn't stop, this will never improve. He's not Bill Peters bad with it yet, because there were times where goddamn Bill Peters would shuffle the lines when we were fucking winning. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw him doing that. I didn't know what his deal was. It's like he was an evil scientist and the fucking Carolina Hurricanes were like his experiment or something. Brendan Moore, I don't feel that way about, obviously, but this thing with the lines, it's got to stop, or we're never gonna get out of this funk that we're in. So if it were me personally, the way I would set the lines, I would say Aho, Jarvis, you don't break them up no matter what. Whoever the third guy is with them, that can be a variable. It could be Robinson, it could be Blake, it could be Natchez, whatever. I think Natchez, Aho, and Jarvis is a good line to experiment with. As far as the second line goes, KK needs to center it. Let him sink or let him swim, but don't bury him in the depth chart just because of one bad period. And don't give me that, I don't number the line stuff. Everybody utilizes some players more than others. Let me put it this way. Even if the lines are not numbered, the players are numbered, if that makes any sense, especially if you're talking about who's utilized more 5-on-5 and who you utilize in certain situations when you have last change. That's the whole thing about it. So you can not number the lines if you want. Either way, they're not all getting the same amount of TOI 5-on-5. They're not all utilized on the power play. They're not all utilized on the penalty kill. There's only certain guys who do certain things, and there's very few players who are all situations. So then Natchez, KK, Svetch, you could maybe make a second line out of that if you don't have Natchez on the first. Personally, I would love to see the KK, Natchez, Robinson line come back, unless Aho and Natchez's chemistry is off the charts. If it is, then what you can do is you can have Aho, Natchez, Jarvis for a line. You still got plenty of speed there. They're maybe getting a ton of size, but Seth Jarvis plays above his size. And Martin Natchez has unlocked another level of skating ability and puck management to where people are not hitting him nearly as easily as they once did. He's being a lot smarter on entry and everything like that. Those 3 guys combined would be a very hard line to play against, because Jarvis brings you the physicality and the ability to separate guys from the puck with body contact. He can go to the corner and dig pucks out. Aho does everything. He's your safety valve at center at the middle of the ice. And then Martin Natchez is your possession guy, your play driver, your guy who generates clean entries in situations where a lot of other players can't, where he's threading the needle and walking it through the phone booth instead of dumping it in. So there you go. You could have that line there. So then if you do that, you can put KK, Robinson, and Svechnikov on a line. I think that would work really well. And you could put Svechnikov on the right wing. Let that be your top 6. And then when you build the bottom 6 from there, okay, do you want a scoring touch along with Stahl and Martinook? Okay, put Jackson Blake there, and then you've got one. And then everybody else on the fourth line, and then utilize them as necessary and leave them alone for a little while. Let them acclimate. If they lose tonight, let them try to acclimate. If they lose the next game, let them try to acclimate, because they are going backwards the more and more that they don't let these guys try to acclimate and work through issues. If Rod Brind'Amour was a crew chief to a race car and I drove it, I would get the fuck out in the middle of the race and quit, because of how much he would want to adjust the thing. Because I tell him, the car needs a little bit of an adjustment. It needs, maybe 2 pounds of pressure in the tire. Next thing I know, tear the whole fucking thing down. No, that's got to stop. As soon as the Brind'Amour stops, the team will get going in the right direction. I hate to levy this type of criticism against Rod, but it's just the fact of the matter. How well the defense does is affected by how well the forwards play in front of them. And not to mention, when you're playing in a man-on-man system like what Carolina does, you constantly have to be like, okay, do I pick up this guy or is he already picked up? If you're not acclimated to your line mates around you, that's less cerebral knowledge. That's less, energy that you have with those guys to know what exactly is going on. That's another reason why you can't constantly shuffle the lines up like this. It's like if you're playing with the same guys all the time, in a situation, okay, this guy's picking him up, this guy's picking him up, here's where I need to go. That becomes a lot more difficult if you're playing with different players all the time. So once that changes, I think everything will start sorting itself out. Carolina will get back to outshooting the opponent. They will get back to denying transition. They'll get back to defending in their own zone better. They'll get back to, doing quicker zone exits and sustaining the forward check and everything like that. As soon as the forwards get acclimated to each other and they have a sustained environment and sustained line mates, consistent line mates, they will be fine. And then once that happens, particularly once the back checking starts getting better, the defense has a little bit pressure taken off of them. They get better at denying entry and suppressing shots. Then you're spending more time in the offensive zone, and then the Gostisbehere-Walker pair in particular is not getting criticized online by a bunch of people who still think that we should have kept Shea and Pesci, who will say that if we do anything, who will say that at anything short of a Stanley Cup final or winning one game in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Shea Pesci crowd is going to come out of the woodwork and say that we should have kept them both, even though they were horribly declining. And I've got numbers to back that up. So I just haven't made that video yet. But that's my TED Talk when it comes to the lines. Bottom line up front, or TLDR, whatever you want to call it. Figure them out, set them up, let them acclimate. And if you do need to make adjustments to them, maybe change one player here, one player there, because that shit that came out in the third period against the Islanders, I was fucking baffled by that. And I wasn't even watching the game. I got the notification on my phone and I looked at it. I'm like, what the fuck is this? So if we see the end of the Blendamore, we will start seeing success. All there is to it. All right, let's see some of the comments here. BTS says, "Oh, sorry, I don't really pay attention to contract length." Yeah. KK signed a long-term one. I think he's inked until 2029. I want to say. I don't know off the top of my head. All Canes Network, what's up, bud? I can't listen to the show tonight because I'm at the game, but I predicted 6-3 Canes win. Hopefully the new lines work out. Yeah, and if they do work out, leave them alone. Like, if nothing else, and if they're really just at the point where they don't think KK is going to work out, retain $1 million and get him out of here. If you can, send him to San Jose or something, a team that he would not make worse, or Chicago, a team he wouldn't make worse, and then spend some future aspects and a B prospect and bring Ryan O'Reilly in from Nashville. And then there you go. You have a guy who, if I remember correctly, he's won a Selke, I believe. Hold on. Yeah, okay, he won one in 2019. I thought so. Okay, so Ryan O'Reilly's a Selke winner, and he earned it that year. He really did. Like, it was far and away him, because when I saw that, I remembered that. I would definitely say, like, if you're really at that point where you think he's not going to work out and you need to bridge the gap until Felix Unger-Sorm is ready, if you think that he's the future 2C of this franchise, get KK out of here, retain $1 million, just eat it, be happy, and go get Ryan O'Reilly from Nashville. Be like, hey, here's a couple of picks, here's a B prospect, and bring him in, or something along those lines. I know, much easier said than done. Oh, hey, buddy. Happy to see you're up and moving around now. My dog's, like, not been the happiest lately because he had to get a couple of teeth yanked. But get him out of there. If you got to sweeten the pot, do it somehow. Get Ryan O'Reilly in here or someone like him. But I think that would be a realistic trade target, because if you get $3 million of KK salary off the books, then you're getting close to where you would have enough to get Ryan O'Reilly. Just do that. Then your depth chart, or your top 3 centers, become Aho, Ryan O'Reilly, and Jordan Staal. And if you need to potentially maybe move Drury for some reason, even though I think Rod would lose his mind about it, to maybe get some more salary, Ryan Suzuki is probably at the point where he could play 4C for the rest of the season. And honestly, that might be his roster spot if he didn't get constantly, sidelined with injuries as he has over the last few years. So if KK is not going to work out here, just rip the Band-Aid off. That's all there is to it. Catherine Bartlett, welcome back, ma'am. Kochetkov needs to start tightening the screws on his game. Yeah, and what annoys me about that is there's times where it's like, it looks like, it's like watching Kochetkov play is like training a really energetic puppy, I think. There's times where you're like, okay, good boy, you figured it out. And then there's other times where it's like, yo, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you literally just went to the bathroom outside and now you're inside doing it again. There's games where I see him play really controlled, like really good. Like, okay, the Colorado game. There were two of the two of those breakaways. I thought for sure he would go for a poke check. especially the one against McKinnon, I believe it was. No, he just challenged pretty aggressively, but not too aggressively, came out, made a smart save, and he was barely at the top of the crease when he did it. Whereas up to as little as a few weeks ago, he probably would have been going for the Pochetkov on him at the blue line or at the top of the circle. There's times where he shows that control, and then it goes away like it did, like the thing I heard about that happened in the game against the Islanders. So he's definitely just got to tighten his game up a little bit. He's come a long way, but he's got to find that happy medium between being overly aggressive and getting himself nearly injured and not losing his edge that he plays with. Once he figures that out, he'll be fine. But right now, he's closer to good than bad in that regard, in my opinion. He's closer to figuring it out. Let's see. Rosovsky compared him to a Ferrari. Yeah. He gets so close to figuring it out, like he did in the Colorado game, playing with a ton of control. What I saw of the I forget what game it was I was watching last week, because like I said, I didn't really prioritize watching the Canes this week. I had other stuff to do. Like I'm seeing where he's playing with more control, but he's still making himself big, challenging aggressively, but he's not doing stupid shit and losing his stick and all this other stuff. So he's getting there, and this is a good opportunity for him to really dial in his game and fine-tune it with Freddie Anderson still being out. I expect Ticker to get a few starts over the course of the next few weeks, because Freddie's not going to be ready until about February, and even then, it's Freddie we're talking about. So I'm not wanting him to suffer a setback by any means, because when he's on, he's lights out. But we do have to consider the possibility of that happening. Brad, what's up, bro? Good shit, brother. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, guys. So I think I'm going to call it. One thing I will talk about here in the near future, I'm going to change and this is primarily thanks to Rod changing the lines all the time. I had this idea. I decided I'm going to take the slides out of the part of Landfall Hour that does the expected goals percentage and the Corsi percentage and all that stuff of the team and the goals percentage and all that. What I think I'm going to do on the slide where I show the projected 5-on-5 lines, if there's enough data, I'm just going to put the XG percentage and the goals percentage and just talk about it that way. Now in the playoffs, when you're playing against the same team 4 to 7 times in a row, it'll be a whole lot easier to just put that stuff in there and amend the data game after game when you're playing against the same guys. I think that I will do that come the playoffs, but I'm going to simplify the approach for Landfall Hour in the future. I also don't know how many shows I'm going to be doing between now and about January 7th time frame. We're going on vacation at the end of the month, and I have a bunch of stuff to do between now and then. Additionally, playing in that alumni game, it really motivated me to I've been doing physical therapy because I want to get back on the ice full time. Playing in that alumni game really, really motivated me to take an extra step with that. I'm going to try to start going more often and start doing the exercises at home more often and all that other kind of stuff. So I may not be on here as much. I'm still going to try and do Landfall Hour and Damage Report. I will try to do Damage Report tonight, as a matter of fact. However, they will probably be a little bit shorter, not nearly as elaborate. I'll save the super elaborate detailed stuff for the playoffs. But that's going to be it for me today. And actually, no, it won't. 1 second. Dylan Bollinger, what's up, buddy? Sitting in a restaurant waiting on my food while I'm watching this, getting some looks, but hey, they can figure it out. I'm wearing a jersey. Oh, yeah. I appreciate it. Maybe they know it's me, though. You might be surrounded by some of those people who did not like the fact that I vehemently defended Tony D'Angelo on multiple occasions, and they assume things about me based on that. Alrighty, guys. I'm jumping off of here. I'm going to get ready to watch the game, feed my big dog here and everything like that. Thank you very much for joining me. Damage Report, if I do it tonight, it'll be a lot like this where we just kind of talk about it real quick and everything. But that's going to be about it for me now. I will see you guys later.